Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone in the franchise world. My name is Paul Segreto, and this is Franchise Today. Seems like things are calming down coming out of the IFA convention and Franchise Expo South, and of course, we're right on the verge of looking forward to multi-unit conference, legal symposium, and some other events. But for right now, we have a little break in the weather, although it's not a break in the weather here in Texas. It is pouring like cats and dogs. And I'd like to welcome my co-host, as always, Stan Friedman.
Sunny and beautiful in Atlanta today, Paul, which comes with a price because we're entering March and we're on the front end, on the cusp of the front end of pollen season. So Stan's usual gravelly voice might even be an octave or two lower today.
Well, hopefully here it's blowing all that pollen and stuff out of the way. We get our annual coating of green dust. That's just absolutely horrible. When we talk about dust, I think there's some magic dust going on in franchising right now. Stan, and why don't you take us into the front of the house?
Well, a couple of things to share with you this week, Paul, and with our listeners. You touched on one of them just at the opening of the program. The IFA's 49th Annual Legal Symposium is upcoming May 15th through 17th in Washington. I can't think of a more important time with all that we've been focusing on these past 2 or so years with some of the existential threats to franchising. The Legal Symposium this year will provide value and real-world solutions to both business executives and their franchise legal partners. And I guess the agenda this year is really going to be focusing heavily on the practical use of the law and the how-tos for navigating today's business and regulatory environment. And while a lot of franchise executives might think this is only for lawyers, strike that thought. Anyone involved in franchising, from in-house counsel and CEOs to development and sales executives, paralegals, compliance officers, franchise administrators, even franchisees interested in learning more about the legal and business aspects of our business model should all make plans to attend. There's never been a more important time where the dynamics and the legal ramifications of our franchise business model are evolving. In fact, evolving at a pretty quick pace. So the symposium this year, more so than ever, mark May 15th through the 17th on your calendar. It's at the JW Marriott in Washington, D.C., and I think it's a really critical year for maxed out attendance at the Legal Symposium. And speaking of legal, Paul, some good legal news came out of 2 states as reported this week in the IFA Insider. Wisconsin and Utah both passed pro-franchisee laws as IFA wins 2 state efforts as the franchise business model at the state level continued last week with the passage of legislation defining franchisors and franchisees as separate entities in both the states of Wisconsin and Utah. Wisconsin Governor, former presidential candidate Scott Walker, signed State Bill 422 into law, another success for the efforts to roll back the U.S. National Labor Relations Board, NLRB, joint employer definition. And the Utah legislature approved House Bill 116, pretty much doing the same, establishing franchisees as the sole employers of their workers. And these 2 state bills, Utah and Wisconsin, followed the efforts of states such as Michigan, Louisiana, Tennessee, and Texas, nearly a dozen states actually, who have already or are in the process of considering actions to protect local franchises against overreaching federal government legislation. So that's a bit of good news. And on the heels of that good news, some more good news, as franchises are reported to have added 18,500 jobs in the month of February, and this is according to ADP's National Franchise Report. The ADP Research Institute and Moody's Analytics put together the report, which measures franchise employment growth. And who knows if we can win a few more of those state bills that are helping to redefine the definition of joint employment, maybe these 18.5 can become 19.5, 20.5, and even more as more and more people in the franchise world, as franchisees, become encouraged enough to be making new hires and bringing new people onto the payroll. And then lastly, Paul, just on a lighter note, I picked up on this from the IFA Insider as well, and it looks like a blog post of sorts. It's entitled The Inside Scoop, and it was published by our good friend Meg Roberts. But she's kind of talking in here about the need for franchisors to stay on top of the technology required in their businesses, and that they should really stand back and temper high-tech, high-touch, but be aware that not all business models require the same level of engagement with technology, and sometimes it's based on the concept itself and its need for technology. Other times it may be based on the age of the franchisees and their customers. And as such, as she was writing this article, I found a new word. I'm going to quiz you here, Paul, to see if you know this word yet. I never heard of it until I read Meg's write-up here, but the word is nomophobia. Do you know that word?
Maybe the phobia of being stuck in Nome, Alaska in the wintertime?
Close, Paul, but no cigar. Nomophobia has become an official vocabulary term explaining the fear of being out of mobile phone contact. Nomophobia. And whether you work as a franchisor or an independently owned and operated franchise business, staying current on trends and influencing your team, your clients, and prospects is how you survive and thrive in business these days. But to the point that Meg made here, again, we're in the business of high tech and high touch, so you always have to keep it in balance. But any business organization, no matter whether it's millennials or baby boomers that are at your base, can all benefit in several ways by technology in a few key ways: automating reports, providing metrics and analytics on call conversions, satisfaction or search results, and using information to prioritize changes that will propel your business forward. I don't care who your customer is or how old or young they may be. Those are just basic fundamentals that can help you spend more time managing top and bottom line growth when you let automation and technology do some of those mundane things for you that would otherwise eat up cycles of your time. And needless to say, using technology to continually improve the customer experience by providing multimedia quality, safety, and service training manuals followed up with in-person quality checks and regular communication to reinforce company standards. It's a nice piece that Meg wrote. You can find it on FranSocial at franchise.org/insider, and it's Meg Roberts' Inside Scoop. And I thought that was interesting enough to share with everybody today.
Absolutely. Well, I'm happy and excited for Franchise Today to be able to help Jennifer Cashel, the CEO and founder of YSN, promote a fantastic event. Some of you might have seen it on Facebook and LinkedIn. And she writes, propel your career as an activist, a social entrepreneur, organization leader, nonprofit professional, or even intrapreneur. YSN, along with Foundation Center, are proud to introduce a powerful new webinar designed for anyone looking to move an important issue or policy further. Making an impact has so much to do with cultivating a powerful network and getting your messages, products, and services out to as many possible. Foundation Center is the leading source of info about philanthropy worldwide, tracking $220 billion, yes, $billion in grants in 126 different countries while training social enterprise leaders how to build and manage their organizations. YSN, Jennifer's company, fuels young leaders and entrepreneurs from over 100 countries with tools and insights to maximize their impact and potential. They're looking to focus on delivering immediate results in your outreach, marketing, and impact. And the webinar is a paltry $69. It's an hour that could set people up for much bigger things to come. And the website is marketplace.foundationcenter.org. And the name of the webinar is How to Build Your Network for Greatest Impact. And I highly recommend, especially all the millennials out there that are in franchising, looking at franchising, and looking at entrepreneurship, to participate in this event. It's just another one of the great things that Jennifer does, along with the Next Gen program, and there's been a lot of traction coming out of the IFA stand about the Next Gen program. Just a fantastic effort that seems to continue, backed with the likes of, Doc Cohen and David McKinnon and so many others. I mean, it is really a great event.
I can't speak enough about youth and entrepreneurship, Paul. It's really, really hard for me to fathom that it's been as many years as it has since I first got involved with the first Don DeBolt Scholarship winner, which would have been back in 2000 and maybe 4 or 5, when a young kid from Long Island, New York, was awarded the first Don DeBolt Scholarship, introducing me to an organization called DECA, and where this young man was the same age as my son. At the time, they were probably just a few months apart. And I looked at the conversations that I'd have with my son, who was the center of his world then was Xbox or PlayStation. And then I would talk to this young man from New York who was getting the DeBolt Scholarship. And at 17 or so years old, 16 or 17 years old, he was going to work at his dad's deli after school, preparing the payroll for the business, managing a team when his dad was ill. The young guy was amazing to me. And when we brought him to his first IFA convention to get his scholarship and to get up on stage and be granted the scholarship, he spent 2.5 days in the trade show at the IFA, just walking the aisles, meeting entrepreneurs, spending time with Fred DeLuca, other people that he couldn't wait to meet. And I thought this kid was just one of a kind until after that IFA convention, some 5 or 6 weeks later, I got a phone call from John Fistolera, who runs business development at DECA, and this young man, Doug Quimby. And they were inviting me to the DECA International competitions down in Dallas, where I walked into 17,000 more Doug Quimbys, all these kids in blue blazers and khaki pants and competing on the international level against the top of the top worldwide in the DECA organization, which basically DECA, when it first was born, was created to prepare those kids that were not going to go to college for what comes after high school. And ever since then, DECA has grown to be as large an organization at the college level as it is at the high school level, but they still carry on with preparing kids for careers in different aspects of business or enterprise, and entrepreneurship and franchising is one of those verticals. So when I started to see how many other kids like Doug Quimby were in alignment with business and entrepreneurship and franchising as a way of taking their lives into the professional world, I was blown away by it. This was long before I ever heard of Next Gen. And so it's all for me been an adventure, an incredible adventure, to see how what started out with that one young man has morphed my interest in paying it forward in franchising for more and more young kids. And Next Gen and what Jennifer has done, taking this globally to places in the world and introducing franchising as a cornerstone to some economies that it would otherwise not have much of an economy in some third world nations, has just been an amazing feat that she's accomplished and continues to take this work forward. And involving guys like Doc Cohen and Dave McKinnon in the venture can only make good things happen.
Absolutely. And, fast forwarding, 50, 60, 70 years from now, we'll need a different type of next-gen program, and that'll be who replaces Jennifer at that point. I think she's actually irreplaceable. She does so much, has so much energy, and is just so passionate about that program and working with millennials. I mean, she's just an inspiration to all. Well, Stan, today's guest on Franchise Today, we've scheduled Dr. John Hayes, and of course, as many in the franchise community know, he's residing these days in Kuwait. And unfortunately, we have not received a call in from John. And so these are one of those trials and tribulations of doing a live show, and it falls basically at this point on our shoulders. I do hope that everything is okay with John and his family, and that this is just a technical difficulty. Of course, if he does pop on, and I've got looking at email and text and hoping that he responds and we can get him on the show. But for right now, it's me and you and our listening audience.
Well, how many months have we been doing this now, Paul? It was bound to happen sooner or later.
Yeah.
I think the best opportunity in the world to blame it on something like technical difficulties between Kuwait and the Eastern or Central time zone is as good a time as any for it to happen.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. And as we know, you were given the gavel, so to speak, by MFE Expos at Franchise Expo South and for the upcoming West Coast Franchise Expo in Denver about handling a program that Dr. Hayes had presented for many, many years, the A to Z's of buying franchises. And so, why don't you give us a little bit of insight into that program, and hopefully Dr. Hayes will pop on here pretty quick.
Well, I was real honored when MFV asked me if I would do that program in Houston and upcoming in Denver. John's done this, the doctor's done this program at the IFE for I can't count how many dozens of years. And just to be put into the same category as he with 20 plus books that he's written and being one of the few PhDs, I guess I used to joke with Ahmed all the time at Frank Connect about there aren't enough MBAs in franchising. Well, I don't know anybody who's got a PhD other than John Hayes, so he's in a much smaller club. And to have my name associated with a program in the two cities that I get to teach that course, to have my name associated with his doing it at the IFE was a real proud thing for me, just by association. But it was a great opportunity to do something I seldom do enough of when I'm at those expos. I'm usually downstairs on the floor of the show, on the trade show floor where all the franchisors have their booths in the expo. And except for those times that I've spoken for MFV on diversity representing IFA, I've not spent a lot of time upstairs in the symposia and in the rooms where all the education is being shared and all the nuggets are being spread out between paid and free symposia. There's probably as many people up in those classrooms as there are walking the floor in the expo hall. And this year, for the first time, teaching the A to Z's of franchising, I asked Rebecca Monet if she would join me as a co-presenter, because for years I've watched John at various times delivering his program in New York. And of course, MFV shared with me the presentation material that John used in his presentations in New York to be my guideline for what I delivered in Houston and will deliver in Denver. And for years I saw the disc profiles that John sings praises of personality. He in fact even wrote a book, I think, on do you have the personality to be a franchisee. I saw the first time ever, back in my Blimpie days, the value of disc profiles.
Hey, Stan, can I interrupt you a second? I believe we have to have Dr. John Hayes on the line. John, is that you?
Hey, it's me. Sorry, I'm late.
Hey.
Glad to catch up.
Well,
glad you are here.
Yeah, Stan was just, going over about how the gavel was ordered handed to him by MFV of the program that you did for many years, A to Z of buying franchises. So, you're right. I mean, with John and I were just talking back and forth within email, and it is tough being so far away and being in Kuwait, but certainly we appreciate you getting on the line with us. It's not too late. Welcome to Franchise.
Glad to be
today.
here. Yeah.
So, Paul, why don't we stop right where I was, and I will pick back up where I left off. But first, perhaps it would be a better idea to just treat the audience to a brief introduction of Dr. Hayes, and then I can pop a question to him that I was just going to talk about. Now he's here to answer.
Great. Well, since 1979, Dr. John Hayes has worked in the franchise community as a consultant, franchisee, and franchisor. He's the author of a large number of franchise-related books, countless articles that have appeared in media worldwide. As I said, he's residing in Kuwait right now, and we're looking to discuss the broad topic of how to buy franchises. John, welcome to Franchise Today. This has been a long time overdue. I know we've even tried it in the past and had difficulties. So it's kind of ironic that we did again today. But again, you're here. Welcome.
Yeah, great. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you guys, and I appreciate it very much. And what do we want to talk about? Let's get going.
Well, John, I was kind of in the middle of a thought that I'm going to back away from and come back to in a minute. But before I do, I just want to. I'm sitting here reflecting on how long it is since the first time I met you, and I can actually remember who introduced me to you. And when that was, it was back in '97, and I believe it was in D.C. when the IFE was still a D.C. event, and it was Dennis Fuller who made the introduction.
Yeah, great. I remember. Yes.
So I remember a lot of iterations of your life, but what I'm really blind to, and I want to share with the audience, is how does a small town guy from 12,000 population today, I don't know what it was when you grew up there, but how does a guy from Dover, Ohio, wind up teaching at a university in Kuwait by way of Philadelphia and perhaps Dallas, Texas on the way?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I can't give you the straight answer because I have no idea. It just, it's sort of like my career has been that way. There's no way that I would have guessed that I would be in Kuwait. No way I would have guessed that I would write numerous books about franchising or have a career related to franchising or own franchise businesses or been the CEO of a franchise company. It's an adventure, and I think maybe that's the answer. It's an adventure that. And I don't know where it's going to lead next, but it's been fun. So,
how did you evolve to Kuwait, though? What? I know there was a story about three young guys that were students that I think might have precipitated some of that I remember reading somewhere. John, what's the rest of the story?
Well, the three young guys actually came afterwards. They were students of mine, and they showed up at the IFE. But I'd already been in Kuwait for a couple of years by then. And back in 2000 and the period of 2000 to 2009, I was very much involved with one business at the time, a real estate investment company called Homevestors based in Dallas. And I was an advisor to the founder of the company starting in 2000. This is one of the best companies ever. And, of course, startup franchisors never have any money. And so he needed a lot of things done, but he had no money. And I saw an opportunity to become a franchisee of his concepts, We Buy Ugly Houses. And so I did, because that was part of the payoff. What I didn't know, and then I became a member of the board of directors. What I did know is that he was going to get ill in 2004 and ended up on his deathbed, and that's where he asked me to be the CEO of the company and to succeed him, which I did in late 2004. and continued until 2009 when the business was sold. It had been sold in 2008, and by that time, the bottom fell out of the market. Subprime lending was lost in 2007, and when that happened, the business started to change, so it had to be downsized and sold. And in the back of my mind, I always wanted to go back to university teaching, but I could never afford to do that because university professors are not well paid, and so I always said, well, I'm going to wait until I can afford to do it. And in 2009, I still wanted a couple more years in the corporate world, but in 2009, I said, okay, I'm going to start looking. And 2010, I had a couple of offers, one in Texas and then one at a place called Gulf University. And I said to my wife, that must be Mississippi or Florida or New Orleans or something. And it's because I didn't apply. And when I went and looked, and it said Kuwait, and I said, Kuwait? We're not going to go to Kuwait. I'd already been to Saudi Arabia, and my wife wasn't invited to go to Saudi Arabia, so I said, there's no way we're going to go to Kuwait. I think I'll stay in Texas. But what a university professor would make was a third of what I was making as a CEO. So, and then when you pay U.S. taxes on top of that, well, I was going to have to continue being a consultant, which I didn't want to do that flying every week. But in Kuwait, there are no taxes, and when you're an expat, the United States government gives you a break. The first $100,000 is not taxed, and they said, look, your wife is going to love Kuwait because we're very westernized, and there's lots of franchising going on here, and you'll be amazed at what it's like. And that was 6 years ago, and we came thinking that, well, okay, we'll go for a semester, and then we'll come back to the United States. But here it is 6 years later, and it's been a great adventure. It's allowed us to travel to many parts of the world that we would have never been able to go from the United States or would have hesitated to go from the United States because of the cost. But, I've been to Jerusalem 4 times, for an example, and that's not something you're going to do 4 times, most likely from the United States.
No doubt. I'm certain that's true. This is Franchise Today. I'm Stan Friedman, along with Paul Segreto, and our guest, the esteemed author, professor, serial entrepreneur, and franchise executive, Dr. John Hayes. Franchise Today is brought to you by Paul Segreto's Franchise Foundry. Franchise Foundry is a business accelerator that boasts more than 30 years of experience helping emerging brands bring sustainable growth to their franchise systems. At Franchise Foundry, Paul and his team utilize a hybrid coaching and consulting approach that fosters the development and deployment of effective short and long-term solutions for their clients. They do this in franchise management and operations, change management, traditional and digital marketing, relationship and business management, technology, and of course, domestic and international franchise recruitment and development. Franchise Foundry can also assist franchise brands with raising capital and the exploration of merger and acquisition opportunities. Learn more about their expanding list of clients across various industry segments at franchisefoundry.com. That's www.franchisefoundry.com for Paul's Franchise Foundry. Franchise Foundry is also brought to you by FRM Solutions, where we offer best-in-class CRM and content management software designed specifically for franchising. Built in industry-leading Microsoft Dynamics CRM, our solutions are cloud-based or fully functional from right inside your Outlook inbox. Everything you need to effectively manage relationships with prospective and existing franchisees is easily accessible from your PC, your Mac, your smartphone, or tablet. With FRM Solutions, you're empowered to accelerate franchise sales, streamline store openings, enhance collaboration, and better manage your processes and workflows, and franchisee performance as well as compliance. With FRM, you can even track and manage all of your communications with your prospective franchisees, and not just with emails, but text messages as well. Check us out at frmsolutions.com and see how easy it is to sort, report, and dashboard all of your vital data. No hassles, no long-term contracts, no excuses, just solutions. Check us out at frmsolutions.com. And with all of that said, John, while we were waiting to have you join us on the International Telecom Connection, I was waxing on about the A to Z's of buying a franchise and how proud I was to have been given the honor to teach the course in Houston and coming up in Denver that you've done for so many years in New York at the IFE, and just how proud I was to have my name even associated with yours, having no books to my credit against the 20 to yours. I was actually getting into a place, though, where I was so glad that you joined us at this particular point, because what I was about to talk about was the very first exposure I've ever had to disc profiles came from my exposure to you when I was still at Blimpie. And I learned about disc then, and I know that you teach that and have written about that. And since, as I did the first program for A to Z's in Houston, I invited somebody who you may or may not know, who has become a dear friend of mine. Her name is Rebecca Monet, and Rebecca owns a company called Zoracle. And Zoracle does, it takes personality and brings it to another dimension of science behind whether you're fit to be a franchisee or not. And actually, instead of just predicting personality and behavior, there are about 11 different data points that are scientifically measured in her profile. And what I was hoping is that someplace between now and maybe as late as New York, if not sooner, knowing what your travel looks like, I would love to get you and Rebecca together, because with what you've done with personality and what she's done with science, I think can only be a quantum lift when the two of you meet each other and figure out how the two together can be even more impactful than just one or the other.
Well, that sounds great. I believe very strongly in profiling people before they buy a franchise. And in a quick story, I hope I can make it quick. When I took over as the CEO at HomeVestors, we had about, I think, 225 franchisees at that time. And I really didn't know who they were. And so I said to the CFO one day, or the controller, that I wanted to have a rank ordering of the franchisees by the amount of money that they generated for us on an annual basis. And it sounds like sort of a greedy thing for me to do, but I think it was also a responsible thing for me to do, to find out who are these 225 and who's number one and number two, number three, number 10, and so forth. But I'd also like to know who's number 225 or number 210 or 200. Who's at the lower end? So when they gave me the list of the franchisees rank ordered in that way, I said to the executive team, do you all know who these people are at the top 10? Because these aren't the people we've given awards to at the convention. Some of them we did, but some of them were strangers to everybody sitting around the executive table. And so that changed one aspect of our business. But then that led me to say, the next list I want is the rank ordering just like this, but I also want to know what their disc profile is. And we were using a modified disc. It was called something else at the time, but it was essentially a DISC personality profile. And I wanted to know what was the profile of the top 25 producers. And once I saw that profile was essentially a DI, a driver and an influencer personality, or a dominant and influencer personality, I said to the sales team, I only want you to sell DI personalities, because the other personalities, they're either in the middle, or there were some personalities, the C personality particularly, they're at the bottom. So I don't want any more C personalities. And this, again, I think maybe this sounds like, gee, what an SOB he is. But I was doing those people a favor. The C personality could not generate the business, could not pay us enough money, and they were unhappy, and they took a lot of training and support, and they couldn't understand why they were unhappy, and of course they were mad at us some of the time, and this is where your lawsuits come from as well. And if the training staff is spending 3 times as much time with the bottom 25% and no time with the top 25%, it just made sense to me that we've got to stop selling to the wrong people. And one of the things that we were able to do is to say to someone who was the wrong personality profile, we could say to them, look, for your own good, we're not going to award you a franchise. But here's what you could do. Get a partner who has the right personality to match your personality, and then we'll talk to you about buying a franchise. And in many cases, that worked out. Some cases, people got mad at us. Some cases, people sued us. They said that we were bigoted and so forth, and we were against women, we were against minorities, blah, blah, blah. But I knew that, I could show anybody, look, here are the top 50 franchisees out of 225, and look at how much money these people make, and look at what they have in common, the profile. Now look at the bottom 25. What do they have in common? A different profile. So who are we helping here? So I always say to franchise prospects who I coach a lot of people who want to buy franchises, and as you point out, the A to Z's of buying a franchise, which I've been teaching for more than 25 years. I think it'll be in June the 25th year at the IFE alone. I always say to them, don't buy a franchise just because it's the hottest one or because your neighbor bought one and said it's great. It may not be right for you. It might not be a good fit. So the personality profiling or the behavioral profiling is so important. And most franchisors don't do this because they don't want anything to get in the way of a sale. And prospective franchisees don't know to insist on this or to do this. And as a result, they end up buying franchises where they fail. And I'm sure we've all seen this. And, shouldn't be a mystery to us as to why this happens.
Absolutely not.
Certainly, putting a square peg into a round hole is not to anybody's advantage. Go ahead, Stan. I stepped on you.
No worries, Paul. No worries at all. Hey, John, Professor, with your permission, I'm going to share contact information between you and Rebecca, and hopefully between now and New York, you guys can correspond at least and have the opportunity to meet each other at the IFE, where I'd be privileged to make the introduction and see what happens. What will happen is going to benefit the industry we all love so much because we're paying it forward again, bringing 2 people who have nothing but the best interests for sustainable growth in franchising to meet one another. Only good things will come from that, I'm certain.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I don't know Zoracle. I've heard of it, but I don't know it. In my books, and I'm kind of excited that when I was calling you guys, one of my, I always keep my web browser on Amazon.com on the bestsellers in small business and franchising, and my book, 101 Questions to Ask Before You Invest in a Franchise, is the #1 bestseller at the moment. It's changed every hour. So I have the #1 bestselling book, and I have the #8 best-selling book, which is Fat Signs, the Business Opportunity, and I have the #9 best-selling book, which is Buy Hot Franchises Without Getting Burned. And in all 3 of those books, I talk about DISC personality profiling and how easy that is to get that done. And I also tell people to go to howtobuyafranchise.com, my blog, where I talk about this and where they have an opportunity to take DISC if they want. But I also talk about other profiling tools. One is called Franchise Navigator, and it's been around a long time, and another one out of Canada. And I include this information in my books because I feel so committed to people that, look, do not buy a franchise unless you know, first of all, that you are a right fit for franchising, because most people are not. And secondly, just because you're a good fit for franchising doesn't mean you should buy ABC franchise as opposed to XYZ franchise, because one franchise is a retail franchise, the other franchise is a home-based service franchise, and you've got to make sure you're cut out for that type of franchise. These are steps, by the way, that most franchise prospects skip, that nobody tells them that they should be doing this.
Well, the introspectives that people need to know about themselves, there's a whole lot that they need to know about themselves before they attack the floor of a trade show and start asking questions about brands that aren't even things they should be considering before they learn a little bit more about the second most important thing that I believe is a critical attribute to success in franchising. First, you've got to have money, and second, you've got to have passion. And if you don't know where your passion is, and you're thinking you're just going to get on the floor of that show and replace a job, not so much.
Right, that's a problem.
You know, John,
we see this all the time.
In your book that you just mentioned, buy hot franchises without getting burned, I really found it interesting. The on the first page, you talk about various questions that typical candidates have. And, some of those questions, are basically, what's the franchise failure rate of that particular brand? What's the success rate? How many franchisees are satisfied with their franchisors? How many franchisees are earning at least $150,000 a year? How many franchisees, if given the chance, would choose to buy that same franchise again? And you said, all good questions, but the answers to those questions are really irrelevant if you're planning to acquire a franchise business or what might be called a franchise opportunity. Why are they irrelevant?
Well, I'm talking about, people will come up to me and they'll say, well, what's the success rate in franchising of all, we know that there are something like 800,000 franchised businesses in the United States. And so they'll say, okay, of the 800,000, how many of them are successful, or how many of them does the owner take home at least $150,000 a year? And they'll ask a lot of generalized questions. And I always say, first of all, nobody can give you the answer because no one knows, because franchisors are not required to disclose that depth of information. And so nobody knows the answer. We don't know how many pick the franchise, and we don't know how many of the franchisees are successful, unless the maybe an earnings claim helps to some extent. And in some cases, franchisors do make that information available, but for the most part, they don't. But if I said, 92% of all franchises succeed, and 68% of all franchises take home at least $150,000 a year. Now, I'm making up that information, but let's say that were true. It's still irrelevant, because if you go out and buy XYZ franchise and you're not a fit for it, well, you're not going to succeed, and you're not going to take home $150,000 a year. So what good do the statistics do? It's far better, if you're going to ask that information, then tell me the franchise you want to buy. It doesn't franchise brand. Okay, you're going to buy a franchise called franchise, or you're going to buy John's Pizzeria, which I usually use in my A to Z's of buying a franchise, because when we're in New York, there is a John's Pizzeria actually. But you're going to buy my John's Pizzeria. You should be asking me, John, the franchisor, of your 100 franchisees, how many of them take home more than $150,000 a year? How many of them own one unit? How many of them own multiple units? How many of your 100 franchisees consider themselves successful? How many of your 100 franchisees, given the chance to do it again, would buy John's Pizzeria all over again? So you've got to be asking questions that are relevant to the brand and not to franchising in general.
And you mentioned, and there was a quote that I put in the intro to today's show, and you said, for years, franchising has been the most popular path for those looking to open a small business. But with so many options in so many industries, deciding which opportunity is the best is almost an impossible decision. And certainly the breadth of that is just tremendous. And as you said, specifically about a brand. But what would your advice be to somebody that's just saying, I'm interested in doing something different. I think I'm interested in franchising. What should be their first steps to even get to the point of being able to decide whether or not a particular brand is for them?
Yeah, well, again, I'm going to go back to what I've already said. When I coach people, I will not talk to you. I will not take your money. I will not schedule any time with you until you do a personality profile that I can look at and say, look, I'm going to save you money. Franchising is not for you. You are not a good follower. You like to reinvent the wheel. You're a creator. You're a leader. And not that leaders aren't matches for franchising, they are. But in your case, your profile is so strong, you really should become a franchisor, not a franchisee. And so I'm going to do you a favor. I'm going to talk you out of becoming a franchisee. Now, if you insist on coaching, I will coach you, but with that caveat that I doubt that we're going to find a franchise that you can buy. There are some franchise, and people think that, well, I'm an entrepreneur, so I'm cut out for franchising. Because you are an entrepreneur is why you are not cut out for franchising. Franchisors do not want entrepreneurs because you're going to reinvent the wheel. You want to know why it works, and the franchisor doesn't necessarily want you to know why it works. They don't want you to know the secret sauce, and that's not how you make money, figuring out why it works or how it works. You make money by working what the franchisor has already created. And unless you have that kind of personality, there's no sense talking about any brand because you're not cut out for franchising. Then let's say we get across that, say, okay, you do have a franchise, you have a profile that many franchisors would be interested in, and those franchisors are in, I'll just pick a category, in the home services businesses where there are a whole lot of them, lots of opportunities to select from. And so I will help you understand. I'm not going to sell you a franchise because I don't do that, but I'm going to help you understand what these home service franchisors are looking for in a franchisee, and I'm going to help you understand on a day-to-day basis what kind of work will you be doing. You thought you would be doing technical work, but you will not be doing technical work. In fact, you're going to be selling. Your job is to go out door to door and sell the service and hire the technicians. And that's a flip-flop for a lot of people, particularly in that industry, because they come up as technicians and they don't know how to be salespeople or marketing people. And unless you know that piece, well, the home service providers, they don't want they don't want technicians. They want marketing and salespeople.
Right.
So that's how I dig into it.
Yeah, I mean that's excellent. I mean, we could
related to that, I should say that people will still say, "Oh yeah, but I want this one because this is the hot franchise." And okay, that buying a hot franchise is the fastest way to get burned. And we've seen this. I can show you examples of that over and over again. Just because it's a hot franchise doesn't mean it's right for you.
Yeah, and certainly we can debate and do a whole show on whether or not people think franchisees are entrepreneurs. I love your take on that. I feel very much the same way. But is there at any time, John, where you would recommend to an interested party that they should look at a emerging brand as opposed to a legacy brand?
Yeah, lots of times emerging brands make perfect sense for people, depending on your appetite for taking risks, because you are going to take more risks. But lots of people understand that. And with franchising, it's at least a calculated risk. If it's an emerging brand and they've only got 25 units, you're taking a greater risk than if they have 200 units, but you have a ground floor opportunity and you might be able to get some advantages that you would not get in that legacy brand. But again, it comes down to, do you have the appetite for this? do you have the right behavioral profile for this? And also, it's so important to look at the brand, because the brand itself, if the brand will allow you, and unfortunately too many of these franchisors are so closed-minded and scared about doing what I did, to find out, well, who are my top producing franchisees? That part they don't mind doing, although many of them don't. They don't know to do that. But I want to know their behavioral profile. What is it that they're doing? What is it that they've got that the other franchisees don't have? And if you know that, if you go to a franchise company and you say, I want to know what the behavioral profile is of the top 25 producers, hopefully that franchisor could tell you. And then I want you to match my profile to the top 25. And it doesn't mean I won't buy the business, but it means that if I don't match that top 25 profile, then what am I missing? If I'm missing the sales part of the equation, then I'm going to go get a partner who brings that in, or I'm going to hire somebody who brings the sales to the business that I can't provide. Or maybe it's customer attentiveness, which is more of a C or an S personality on the DISC profile. And without that, you're not going to succeed in certain businesses. But if you're a driver, you don't really care about how customers feel. Not that you want to ignore it, but you're not going to spend any time on it because it's not what you do well. And you're going to be seen as too slick, or you're going to be seen as fraudulent. And so your business isn't going to be as successful. You've got to supply that S or that C personality, because that's what this business requires.
And John, isn't it true too that too many people go after a business with only one half of their brain engaged, and they look at the emotional aspects of the business, but they don't get into the nitty-gritty of what what they should be looking at, dotting I's and crossing T's. And it's one thing to love a business or a brand as a consumer, but being the person who's delivering that service requires a whole different level of engagement and thinking. And too many times, people go out half-cocked. It's just the emotional high without putting the logistical, the other side of the brain into motion as well.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that, and I see this all the time. Recently, it's been a couple of months now. It's at howtobuyafranchise.com. There's an article about a husband and wife who bought a sign franchise, a business-to-business sign-making franchise, and they were so smart. Their story is so good, not because I wrote it, but because they told it. They said, look, we knew we wanted to buy a franchise, but we had the exit strategy in mind. We wanted to sell the business for more than $1 million, even though we were going to invest a much smaller amount in it. And we wanted to build the business up and be able to sell it within a several-year period of time. This wasn't something we wanted to do for 20 years. So we didn't particularly care if it was food or if it was business-to-business or if it was travel or if it was something else. We didn't care about the product, the service, or the brand as much as we cared about would it allow us to do what we had in mind to reach our goal. And they selected the business based on that. They built the business in a small town, I believe it's in North Carolina, and they sold that business for more than $1.5 million, just as they had planned. And this gave them money they're still young, but this gave them money to relax a little bit, but to take it to the next level and to go into their next business. Very few people approach franchising that way. They do what you said before, Stan. They go to the show floor. I lost my job. I got to find something to replace it with. Well, you're making a huge mistake when you approach it that way.
That's a great story and great advice, John. Before we get to the closing of the show, why don't you tell our listening audience how they can get in touch with you and where they could access your books?
Well, the easiest thing is to go to howtobuyafranchise.com, and there's lots of information there, and all my books are promoted there. and it's easy to contact me right from howtobuyafranchise.com. And just recently, and I saw just today, it hit the new and noteworthy on iTunes, the How to Buy a Franchise show, just debuted in January, so that's another place on iTunes and Stitcher Radio. People can get my information there. And then just go to Amazon.com and search on Hayes, Hayes, franchise, and my books will come up, and hopefully some of them are bestsellers at the time you look. That always helps. It always helps to get reviews. Getting people to review books is just, nobody really likes to do that. I'm looking at Fast Signs is the number 8 best-selling at the moment, and it's got 84 reviews, which is just remarkable. A lot of that is because Fast Signs is such a dynamic promoter. Catherine Munson, the CEO, and their team, they've done a great job of keeping that book out there as a bestseller. I have a series of business opportunity books that are the Fast Signs Business Opportunity, the Mr. Appliance Business Opportunity, Pino's Palette Business Opportunity, and so forth. I've got several new ones that will be coming online in the future to be part of this series. And it's a great way for franchisors to get their name. I mean, Fast Signs is, every week this book is in the top 10 bestsellers, and they do a lot to keep it there.
That's really great, and I appreciate that. And John, I know logistically it was a little difficult. I'm not even sure what time it is in Kuwait, but
it's on 9 p.m. Yeah, 9 p.m.
9 p.m.
We're 8 hours ahead of the East Coast until, I guess, this weekend, when we'll be only 7 hours ahead of the East Coast.
So, yeah, I know it was a logistical challenge, and we took you away from what probably would be a little bit of downtime. But I really do appreciate you taking the time to be with us today, and I'm sure our listeners feel the same. Thank you.
No, I appreciate you guys waiting for me, and I'm glad I was able to get in the door and get online fast enough, because sometimes in Kuwait you don't get online.
Right.
Thank goodness it happened. It was a great pleasure to be with you guys. I look forward to seeing you in person. I will be at the IFE in June, and I'm looking forward to that.
Looking forward to it as well, John, and it's great to hear that while you may be 8 hours ahead of us and the boy is out of the USA, the best parts of the American dream are residing in your spirit in Kuwait, and those students at Gulf are really, really privileged to have you there teaching them the best parts of all the things you bring to the business model of franchising.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, Stan, a little bit of technical difficulties at the beginning of the show, but another great show on the books, and we're right at the 6-month mark of Franchise Today being back on the air, and the two of us being co-hosts, and I think we just keep gaining some momentum day by day, week by week, and certainly with the tremendous roster of guests that are coming on the air.
I'm just sitting here, Paul, wondering if I can find a barter exchange someplace that would trade the currency of Dr. John Hayes' passion for dollars. I'd retire right now if I could have just half of his passion in dollars.
Absolutely. I think that would be the case. We are running out of time at the top of the hour. We'll be back next week, same bat time, same bat station. Until then, my name is Paul Segreto, wishing you the best, the very best, in this great, great thing we call franchising. And Franchise Today is out.
When you're part of a military family, you understand sacrifice and support. So at American Public University, we honor your dedication by extending our military tuition savings to your extended family. Parents, spouses, legal partners, siblings, and dependents all qualify for APU's preferred military rate of just $250 per credit hour for undergraduate and master's level programs. American Public University. Value for the whole family. Learn more at apu.apus.edu/military.